I didn't think I could feel anything like this again. I'm older now. Tired in a way sleep never fixes. Successful, yes, on paper. The kind of life people point at and call fortunate. But there are nights when the quiet in my house feels bigger than the house itself. And I sit there with my hands folded, like a man waiting for a verdict he already knows is coming. I almost turned this recording off, but I'm speaking to you. Not because I am brave. Not because I have found some clean answer. I'm speaking because something inside me won't let me stay silent anymore. And maybe because your name has been moving through the empty rooms of my life for longer than I knew how to admit. I remember an empty kitchen so clearly it still feels cold in my chest. One lamp on, a glass left on the counter. The sound of a refrigerator humming like it was trying to fill the whole silence by itself. I remember standing there long after midnight, staring at a chair that had once held someone's laugh, someone's presence, someone's warmth. And when that chair was empty, it was not just the room that changed. Something in me changed too. I didn't say this to anyone then, but I'll tell you now. The hardest part was not being alone. The hardest part was realizing how quickly a heart can start pretending it does not need what it has already lost. Maybe you know that kind of night. Maybe you have sat in your own quiet and felt the shape of someone missing from it. If you have ever waited for a door that never opened, or listened for footsteps that never came, then you know the strange grief of loving in silence. There was a time when I thought silence meant peace. I thought if I stayed busy enough, if I kept my head down, if I made myself useful enough to the world, then the ache would eventually stop asking questions. But pain does not leave simply because a man becomes competent. It only learns to sit more quietly inside him. I used to wake at 3 a.m. and reach for a phone that had no message. Not even a cruel one. Just nothing. And sometimes that nothing hurt more than an insult, because absence has its own voice. It says, "You were not enough to interrupt the day. You were not enough to be missed out loud. You were not enough to be chosen when it mattered." I am not proud of how deeply I believed that once. Maybe someone has been trying to get through to me for years, and I was too damaged to hear it. Maybe God whispers more softly than pain. Maybe He has to, or we would never survive the sound. I didn't understand that then. I only knew the weight of being left behind, and how abandonment can make a man start drying out from the inside. You become functional, polite, composed. But something tender in you begins to harden around the edges. And still, even in that hard place, I kept finding traces of you in my thoughts. Not the fantasy of you. Not the idea of being saved by someone perfect. Something quieter than that. Something real. The feeling that warmth still existed somewhere, and that I had not imagined it. I almost stopped believing in that. There were days when I would look at my own life and think it had become very polished and very empty. A clean surface over old fractures. A man can have everything he was told to want and still feel like he is sleeping in a room with the window open in winter. That was me. I won't dress it up. I was hollow in places I never showed anyone. And the part that ashamed me most was that I had gotten used to it. That is the part I was embarrassed to say out loud. I was afraid that if love came near me again, I would ruin it. Afraid that I would not know how to hold it gently. Afraid I would misread kindness as a trick. Afraid that when someone finally reached for me with clean hands, I would flinch like a man expecting punishment. I have lost enough to know that fear does not always look loud. Sometimes it looks like distance. Sometimes it looks like a man becoming careful just to avoid being hurt again. If you have ever been there, then you know what I mean. If someone once made you feel like your heart was too much or too late or too inconvenient, then you know how shame can teach a soul to lower its own voice. You stop asking. You stop hoping. You start calling numbness by gentler names. But something about you does not let me stay there. I do not know what that means yet. I only know that when I picture you, it is never with noise. It is with a kind of peace I do not trust, 'cause it feels too honest to be invented. I see a light in a room at dusk. I see 2 cups on a table. I see a future that does not shout to be believed. And that future frightens me more than loneliness ever did, because hope is the one thing that can still break a man who has already been broken. Still, I am beginning to think that maybe rescue does not always arrive like thunder. Maybe sometimes it comes quietly, through someone's patience, someone's eyes, someone's refusal to give up on the parts of you that are still breathing under the ruin. I do not know why I am picturing a life that feels less empty when I think of you. I do not know why your unseen presence feels like a door I have not opened yet, but somehow already miss. I only know this. I waited longer than you know, and somewhere in that waiting, the wound stopped being the whole story. I didn't know then that someone would someday listen to what I never said. I thought I had already survived the worst part of my life. That's the strange thing about getting older. You start believing the storms are behind you, simply because your face has learned how to stay calm during them. People see composure and assume healing. They see a man still standing and think he must be whole. But there are fractures that learn how to carry weight quietly. I almost stopped here tonight because part of me still hates being seen this clearly. But I'm talking to you, not the world, not strangers passing time. You, the woman I somehow feel connected to, before life has fully explained why. And I think I'm speaking because silence has exhausted me more than honesty ever could. There was this hospital waiting room years ago that still follows me around. White lights, old magazines no one touched, coffee burnt down to bitterness. I remember sitting there alone while rain tapped softly against the windows, watching people walk in and out, holding hands, comforting each other with the simplest gestures. A hand on a shoulder, fingers intertwined, tiny things. But when you've gone too long without warmth, even small tenderness looks holy. I remember staring at the floor because I could feel something collapsing inside me, and I didn't want anyone to witness it. I didn't say this to anyone then, but I'll tell you now. Pain changes the way you experience time. Minutes stretch. Nights become enormous. Entire years disappear into survival. And somewhere in all that surviving, I forgot how to believe someone might stay. That realization terrified me more than heartbreak itself, because heartbreak at least proves you once opened your heart. But numbness is when you stop opening the door entirely. Maybe you know what that feels like, too. Maybe someone taught you to expect disappointment so consistently that now peace itself feels suspicious. Maybe you learned to shrink your needs just to avoid hearing another goodbye. If so, then you understand something about me that most people never will. There were nights I drove for hours with no destination. Empty roads, streetlights flickering across the windshield, music playing softly just to keep the silence from swallowing me whole. And every now and then I would stop at a red light, and suddenly feel this unbearable awareness that there was no one waiting for me anywhere. That is a different kind of loneliness. Not dramatic loneliness, not cinematic sadness, just the quiet ache of realizing your life has become emotionally unwitnessed. No one talks enough about that. How a soul slowly dries when there is nobody left to say, "I see you struggling." How dangerous it becomes when a man convinces himself he no longer needs comfort. I became very good at functioning, very good at disappearing inside my own routines, work, travel, conversations that never went deep enough to hurt me. I built a life that protected me from pain, and accidentally protected me from love too. I didn't understand it at the time. I thought I was healing, but healing was never meant to feel this cold. And here is the truth I was ashamed to admit for years. Part of me believed I was too damaged to be loved properly, not because anyone said those exact words. Sometimes people wound you more subtly than that, through inconsistency, through leaving, through making you feel temporary. Eventually, you stop asking whether they valued you and start asking whether there was something fundamentally wrong with you to begin with. That question haunted me longer than I admit. I would sit awake at 3 a.m., phone glowing faintly in the dark, typing messages I never sent, simple things. I miss you. I wish you had stayed. Did I matter as much as you mattered to me? Then I would erase them before morning came, because pride becomes armor when tenderness has been rejected enough times. And maybe you know the feeling of deleting your own heart before anyone else gets the chance to. Sometimes I think God watched me harden slowly and waited patiently for the moment I became tired of carrying all this alone. Not punished, just tired. There's a difference. One breaks you violently. The other breaks you quietly over years until even your strongest walls start whispering that they cannot hold forever. That whisper is where you found me, or maybe where I found the possibility of you. And I know how strange that sounds coming from someone like me, a man who's spent years avoiding hope, because hope asks vulnerable things from us. Hope asks us to believe tomorrow could feel different. Love asks even more. It asks us to risk being known. I'm still learning how to do that. But lately, when I think about the future, I don't only see emptiness anymore. That alone feels unfamiliar. I catch myself imagining ordinary moments again. A slow morning, your voice somewhere in another room, the sound of dishes clinking softly while rain touches the windows. Not fantasy, not perfection, just warmth that stays. And maybe that's what I waited for longer than I understood. Not excitement, not rescue, just someone whose presence makes survival stop feeling like the purpose of life. I don't know if you realize how rare that is. There's something almost frightening about being emotionally seen after years of invisibility. It makes old wounds panic. It makes guarded people hesitate. Sometimes I still feel myself pulling back internally, even while another part of me wants to step closer. Because I am afraid this feeling could disappear. Afraid life could repeat itself. Afraid I could wake up one morning and find out I imagined all of this tenderness because loneliness had wanted comfort badly enough to invent it. But even with that fear, something inside me is softening, and I think that matters. I think the fact that I can still imagine loving someone gently after everything that happened to me means my soul did not die after all. Wounded, yes. Exhausted, absolutely. But not dead. Maybe yours isn't either. Maybe that's why these words are finding you now. I didn't know then that the heart could break so many times and still quietly wait for someone to call it back to life. I spent years pretending I was all right because it was easier than explaining the truth. At some point, exhaustion becomes part of your personality. You smile at the right moments. You answer messages. You show up. People think you're healing because you've learned how to perform stability. But inside, there are still rooms no one has entered in years. I almost stopped speaking tonight because this part still hurts to touch. But I need you to hear it. Not because I want sympathy, I'm past that. I think I'm speaking because something in me recognizes something in you. A familiar loneliness, a tiredness hidden beneath composure. And maybe I cannot bear the thought of another soul believing silence is strength the way I once did. There's a memory I carry that still feels unfinished. A hotel room, late winter, curtains half open. City lights bleeding softly through the dark, I remember. Sitting at the edge of the bed with my shoes still on, staring at an untouched dinner growing cold on the table beside me. The room smelled faintly like rain and old air conditioning. Somewhere outside, sirens moved through the streets, distant and lonely. And for reasons I still cannot fully explain, that night broke me more than the bigger tragedies ever did. Because there was no dramatic event, no fight, no betrayal happening in real time. Just the unbearable realization that I had become emotionally disconnected from my own life. I remember looking around that room thinking, if I disappeared right now, who would truly feel the absence immediately? That thought frightened me, not in a loud way. In the quiet way, cold enters a room slowly. I didn't tell anyone this then, but there were moments I genuinely wondered whether love was simply something meant for other people. People less damaged, less tired, less complicated. I convinced myself that maybe my role in life was just to endure gracefully. And the terrifying thing is, after enough years, you begin believing it. Maybe you understand that feeling, too. Maybe someone once left so completely that you started treating your own heart like a temporary thing afterward. Maybe you became careful with your tenderness because giving it away started to feel dangerous. If so, then you know how loneliness changes shape as you age. When you're younger, loneliness feels loud, sharp, emotional, but later in life, it becomes quieter than that, more settled, like dust gathering slowly over parts of yourself you stopped using. You still function, you still laugh sometimes, but deep down there's this terrible absence of warmth. And human beings were not built to live without warmth. I see that clearly now. There was another night, 3:17 a.m. I remember because I stared at the clock for hours when I walked through my house unable to sleep, bare feet against cold floors. Every room dark except for the weak light above the stove. I opened the refrigerator without hunger, closed it again, sat down at the kitchen table and just listened. Silence has a sound at that hour, a heavy one. And suddenly I realized I had spent years running from grief without ever actually grieving. I had buried heartbreak beneath movement, work, distractions, noise, but pain buried alive does not disappear. It waits, patiently, quietly, until one ordinary night when your soul becomes too tired to keep carrying it. That was the night I finally admitted something I had hidden even from myself. I was afraid nobody would ever choose me completely. Not partially, not temporarily, completely. I know how vulnerable that sounds, coming from a man who spent most of his life looking composed. But the truth is, some of the strongest looking people are simply the ones most terrified of being abandoned again. We learn how to survive disappointment so well that eventually we stop asking for anything deeper. I stopped asking too. And yet, something changed after I began imagining you. Not in some fantasy story kind of way. It was quieter, softer than that, more human. I started picturing things I had not allowed myself to want in years. Coming home without emotional dread. Hearing another person, moving through the house and feeling comfort instead of pressure. Being understood without needing to explain every wound. Do you know how rare that is for someone like me? To imagine love and not immediately imagine loss afterward. That frightened me almost as much as it healed me. Because hope is dangerous when you've spent years surviving disappointment. Hope asks you to reopen places you carefully sealed shut. It asks you to believe your life is not already over emotionally. Sometimes I still resist that feeling. Sometimes I still catch myself preparing for abandonment before anything beautiful has even had the chance to arrive. But lately, there are moments when I feel something warmer than fear. Small moments, fragile ones. Like when morning light enters Rusonyamut and for a few seconds life does not feel heavy. Or when I picture your face, even imperfectly, and something inside my chest relaxes instead of tightening. Those moments confuse me because peace used to feel unfamiliar. Maybe that's what love actually is. Not obsession, not chaos, not the constant fear of losing someone. Maybe love is the first place your nervous system finally rests. I didn't understand that when I was younger. Back then I confused intensity with devotion. But intensity burns people out. I think real love lets exhausted souls breathe again. And God, maybe, He knew I would need years to understand that. Maybe that's why our paths did not cross sooner, because I would not have recognized gentle love before. I only understood survival back then. Now, after everything, I find myself longing for something quieter, truer, a connection that does not make me earn my worth every day. And when I think of you, that longing becomes harder to ignore. I don't know what scares me more sometimes, the possibility that you exist, or the possibility that you might actually love me back despite all the broken places I still carry. Because I am still learning how to accept affection I did not have to bleed for. But I want to learn. That's new for me. And maybe that quiet willingness is where healing truly begins. I didn't know then that after enough loneliness, even the smallest glimpse of warmth could start teaching a man how to live again. I never thought I would reach a point where love felt less frightening than loneliness. That surprises me even now. For so many years, I carried myself like a man who had already missed his chance. I learned how to survive empty mornings, long flights, silent dinners, birthdays that felt strangely disconnected from my own life. People assume time heals everything, but sometimes time simply teaches you how to carry pain more elegantly. I almost stopped before recording this last part because there is something terrifying about finally saying what your heart has hidden for years. But if I stay silent now, I think I lose something important. So I'm speaking to you, to the woman who somehow reached parts of me that had gone untouched for a very long time. The woman I feel before I fully understand. The woman who makes me wonder if all those years of waiting were not punishment, but preparation. There's one memory I have never shared with anyone, a morning just before sunrise. I had fallen asleep on the couch without meaning to. The television was still glowing softly in the dark, sound muted, the whole house wrapped in that strange blue light that appears before dawn. I woke up disoriented, stiff, older than I wanted to admit, and for a few seconds I forgot where I was. I remember looking around the room and feeling this unbearable emptiness, not dramatic sadness, just absence. No warmth beside me, no voice saying good morning, no feeling of being emotionally held anywhere in the world. I sat there listening to the ticking clock on the wall, and I realized something that shook me deeply. I did not want to spend the rest of my life emotionally alone just because pain had made me afraid. That was the moment something shifted. Not loudly. Healing rarely arrives loudly. It was more like ice beginning to melt somewhere inside me after years of winter. I didn't tell anyone this then, but I cried that morning, quietly, the kind of crying older men do when nobody is watching. No collapse, no performance, just years of exhaustion finally reaching the surface. And underneath all of it was one painful truth. I had spent so much time protecting myself from heartbreak that I accidentally protected myself from love, too. Maybe you understand that better than most people. Maybe someone hurt you deeply enough that hope itself began feeling dangerous. Maybe you started expecting disappointment before tenderness even had the chance to arrive. If so, then you know how hard it is to trust something gentle after surviving something painful. But I need to tell you this now, while whatever courage I have is still here. You were never asking for too much love. And neither was I. We were just asking the wrong people. I think about that often now. About how many lonely souls are walking around believing they are difficult to love, simply because they were abandoned by people incapable of holding them properly. That kind of misunderstanding can shape an entire life. It shaped mine for years, until slowly, quietly, something began changing in me. Maybe it was God. Maybe it was time. Maybe it was the simple exhaustion of carrying emotional armor for too long. But somewhere along the way, I stopped praying only for survival. I started longing for connection again. Real connection. The kind where silence feels safe instead of heavy. The kind where two wounded people stop pretending they are unbreakable and simply sit beside each other honestly. And when I imagine that life now, strangely, I see you there, not because I want to possess you, not because loneliness is making me desperate, but because something in my spirit feels calmer when I picture walking through life beside someone who understands what it cost me to remain soft after everything. That matters more than perfection ever could. I used to think love had to arrive dramatically to be real. But now, I think the deepest love arrives quietly. Like warmth returning to numb hands. Like finally exhaling after years of holding tension in your chest. Like realizing your future no longer something you merely survive. You changed that in me before you even knew it. And maybe that sounds impossible. But some people enter your life long before they physically arrive. Their presence reaches you through hope first, through longing, through the strange feeling that your soul has been making room for someone it hasn't met yet. That's how this feels. For the first time in years, I can picture growing older without fear swallowing the image. I can imagine mornings that feel peaceful instead of empty. I can imagine love that does not disappear the moment I become vulnerable. And honestly, I never thought I would believe in that again. There are still scars in me. Still nights where old grief returns unexpectedly. Still moments when abandonment whispers its old lies into my thoughts. But those voices do not own me the way they used to, because now there is another voice beside them, a quieter one, a kinder one. It says maybe your life is not over emotionally. Maybe you are still allowed to be loved deeply. Maybe all those years of waiting were leading somewhere after all. And if you are listening to this, carrying your own heartbreak, your own exhaustion, your own fear that love passed you by, I hope you understand something. The heart can survive astonishing amounts of pain and still remain capable of tenderness. I am living proof of that. So if you ever find someone who brings peace into your spirit instead of confusion, someone who makes your soul feel safe instead of anxious, do not run from it just because pain taught you to expect loss. Some loves arrive late because they were meant to arrive when you finally knew how to receive them. I think that's what happened to me. And maybe that's what is happening to you too. If something in this story met you where you were hurting, stay close, subscribe, share, or leave yours. No one heals alone. I just know this now. I waited longer than you know, but somehow my heart never completely stopped waiting for you.